So what we will be learning now during this session is about the what exactly is a full stack development program and how different technology stacks are there in this full stack development, and what technology stack we will be learning when we attend the further training sessions, and what type of projects we will be in a stage to build once we finish our all the training sessions. That we'll just cover up briefly in this intro. So as someone said, I don't know her name, but she said, right, like building front end and back end. So that is what is here. A full stack development training program is nothing but it typically covers both front end and back end development. And it focuses on the skills and technologies needed to build a modern, scalable, and efficient web applications. So here I have highlighted something like front end and back end, right? So user interface. For example, we mostly are addicted to the social media platforms, right? We see that UI, Facebook you have seen, right? So most of the us will be on the Facebook or Insta. So that front end, whatever you see is the UI. So what is the back end?
The database
Database
or the
services.
Yes,
API connection.
yes, you're right. So the backend is nothing but when you do some interactions, it saves the data, getting some images and all the things, right? Where that is being processed, it being processed by the APIs, which gets deployed on the some servers. So that is the front end and the back end. So next we come see what is a complete full stack development. Just now we have said, right? Front end technology. You will be having a database which stores your data. Then you have an HTTPS, that is the APIs request. Your backend technology. Backend technology is nothing but when it's like controlling your logics and giving you some response data, which you show in the UI. More complex applications where we use AI, something like that platform, right? For that we need algorithms and data structure, and certain UI and certain things they follow the application architecture, web application architecture. For example, say modern view controller, which you have heard. Why we need Git is we are developing all the activities, but where you will be saving or where you will be hosting it, because we cannot save in my local and deploy there, right? So there will be somewhere where a Git is nothing but it's a version control, and you deploy your code or check in and check out your code on your Git. So that's how your Git helps you. Then you, what is the layers in full stack development? So just now we have said, right, the front end GUI, the front end UI, what we see, for example, the Facebook UI, that is nothing but the client side code which runs on the, you can see the second point, runs on the browser. So the UI has launched on the browser, right? So from where the data it gets, the server side code. This is the server side code what you see. But where is that server hosted? Somewhere it should hosted, right? That will be hosted on the web server. So this web server again needs to connect something to fetch the data to the front end, right? So that is nothing but your database. And finally, sorry, and finally, where it is hosted on the operating system. For example, we have seen, right, we have several operating systems like Windows, Linux, and Ubuntu, CentOS. These are all different operating systems what you have. So these are the different layers what you will be finding in a full stack development program. So for you, if you are going to any company or any interviews you are going to attend, right, they'll definitely ask the questions touching from the point 1 to point 5. Point 6, they rarely ask, they only ask you like, do you know the any cloud deployment and how do you do? Because the point 6 job is of the DevOps engineer. So our activity is from 1 to 5. So whenever you're attending any big company or any like TCS, Wipro, Infosys interview questions, right? They will try to focus on all these 1 to 5 points by asking on each layer what is your knowledge. They will evaluate on each layer how you perform. So what are the full stack development program? What it covers completely? Like we have a front end technology. Just now we have discussed about like something like Facebook UI, right? So that's what uses front end technology. The database, because somewhere the data should be stored and fetched to the front end, right? So that is what we use a database. Someone has said, right, APIs we need, so we use the APIs as well. And to fetch the data to the front end, we need a backend technology. Then you have an algorithms and data structures where you, when you're building a more complex AI based something like applications, during that point you need an algorithms and data structures. A web application architecture, a better web application architecture makes your application more performance oriented and scalable. Then you have a Git. Whatever whatever code you write or you develop, right, it should be somewhere hosted, means somewhere it should be checked in, because multiple people will be working on it. So you have a common place from where you pull the code and deploy your application on the server. See, the next we have is the layers. What are the layers in the full stack development? So as a developer, what our job is to do is the point 1 to 5. So most companies, or you go a bigger companies, they focuses on all these activities what we do when we present our resume as a full stack developer. Like what is a client side code, the UI interface, what you see, the browser. Then the server side code means the writing the APIs and other activities. The web server is nothing but where you host your application, both the front end and the back end. Then the database, see from where you fetch the database. The point 6 covers is nothing but is the operating system. Like where, how do you host, whether you host on a Windows box, whether you host on a Linux box, that is what is it. But the point number 6 is mostly for the DevOps engineer. For us as a full stack developer or a full stack engineer, most of the companies focus on 1 to 5 points. That means they focuses on asking questions, technical questions on client side code, client side coding. Then they ask questions mostly on the server side technology, what we put, what type of database we put. So we need to be very, very much familiar for the from the point 1 to 5. So let's see what are the front end technologies we have. So front end technologies is nothing but you have the HTML, CSS, then you have a JavaScript framework libraries such as jQuery, React. Then you have a different frameworks such as Angular, Vue, Backbone, and you have a Bootstrap. Now we'll see what is the backend technologies we have. So if you see, right, the backend technologies, there are a lot of frameworks you have like Ruby on Rails. You would have heard about Python. You would have about PHP. We would have heard about Java. Java mostly nowadays we are covering with Spring Boot. Then you have Scala and Node.js. So most widely used, we are using this Java and Node.js. So then we come to the databases. So what are the different databases you have? Like you have MySQL, you have Postgres, you have MongoDB, you have CouchDB, you have Redis and other DB. But you don't need to know all these databases because it depends on the client requirement which type of database we need to choose. So when you are preparing for any interview, you can either just put MySQL or MongoDB. If you put all, then they keep asking questions on everything. So our main focus will be on MySQL and MongoDB. So we have just discussed, right, like what is a front end development. So it's nothing but client side coding. So the front end development involves building the part of web application that user interacts with. So what are the key technology concepts is like it's an HTML what you use. We already know like HTML head body tags we use. What are the elements like headings, paragraphs, forms, semantics like header, footers and other things, and HTML5 features like local embedding videos and other things. So these are all includes in the front end development for the client side. Then you have the CSS. CSS is nothing but styling your look and feel. That means how the screen should look to a particular user or how it's responsive it should be on a mobile. So all those things are covered in the CSS. So something like Flexbox. Nowadays, this is becoming very much famous. Bootstrap and Tailwind CSS. So mostly modern React applications or modern applications we build, they are mostly using the Tailwind CSS. And the first approach of a developer is they ask is mobile first approach. That means any web application you try to build, it should be mobile responsive. So then this is the heart, what we will be discussing during your further training sessions as well. It's about the JavaScript. So we use the JavaScript to perform the on-click actions or to perform any DOM manipulations, working with the APIs to fetch the data, and you need to showcase in the front end. All those things are covered in the JavaScript. So what are the different JavaScript frameworks we have is React we have, Vue.js we have Angular.js we have. So our during further training sessions, we mostly concentrate on the React. Then I said right version control, Git and GitHub. We will be learning basic Git commands. Like once we have our code, how do you pull the code? How do you add the code to the Git commit? How do you push code? How do you branch it? How do you merge with when there are multiple peoples are there and push it to the main branch? It's about collaboration with your team. So you when you're going to a particular bigger organization, you won't be working like an individual developer. You will be having a group of people, 5 6 people working on the same piece of code. So at that time what you need to know you need to use the Git where you collaborate with your team and start working on those things. Then we come to the backend development. So the backend development is nothing but it involves creating the server side logic and the database management. So the key technology concepts here is Node.js, what we will be using learning. Then you have Python. This is also one of the good technology. Then you have Ruby. Then you have PHP. PHP generally uses Laravel. Then you have Java. So mostly using is Spring Boot. Then you have C hash, which uses ASP.NET. These are all the backend technologies which most of the company uses to work on. For us, if we are familiar with either one of the technology, should be sufficient to clear any interviews. So then we build the APIs. APIs is nothing but the RESTful APIs like CRUD operations, what we do. Then you have authentication. So each API, what we develop, right? We need something authenticating that API, like only through the access, I need to allow this API to particular users. So that is what is the APIs. And we create and handle these endpoints using Express. So during our training course, in the further sessions, we will be discussing more about Node and Express. Then you have a different databases, which is nothing but MySQL, which is a relational database, and NoSQL, which is document based, like MongoDB. MySQL is relational, where you use select, insert, and update commands. So you have other ORM tools. This also we will be showcasing on training sessions, like how to use SQLiz in Node.js for MongoDB to fetch, insert, create, instead of writing a plain SQL queries, how can you use the ORM tools? What is authentication and authorization is we follow mostly in our training sessions like JWT. It's a JSON Web Token. We can also use OAuth to for the third party authentication, but mostly our training session mostly concentrate on JWT. It's a JSON Web Token. Why we need that is we are building the API, but that API might be accessed with everyone. So to restrict those APIs based on the token based mechanism, we follow the JWT token. So most of our training we cover with the JWT token. Then we have server management. That means we have built your front end, we have built the back end, but we need to host somewhere, right? So that is what we use, like Nginx or Apache. So our training session mostly covers with Nginx, where we host our React application. Server side language, we will be using Express and Node. Now recently we got something called Fastify. So we will be covering both Express and Fastify in our sessions. So what they have is, how they use is, we use asynchronous, promise, await, and callback functions, and using that we wait for an API response and move further. So then finally you have DevOps and deployment. This is not this we need to have some basic understanding, but mostly we will be only doing it manually. But this process is an automated process with which a DevOps engineer will does. So mostly we can see a different hosting and deployment sites. where you can host applications on Netflix, Heroku, AWS, DigitalOcean. Docker is a container management which which eases your application deployment. In our training sessions, I will showcase you on how you can deploy on a DigitalOcean cloud by creating a box and connecting it through a VPN, and how do you deploy your React and backend application, and how you launch. That we will be covering by using DigitalOcean. CI/CD is a continuous integration, like we will be doing manually, but this is a continuous integration process which uses Jenkins, and that gets automatically linked to your GitHub. So directly they pull the code and deploy. That is an automation process. You have your database. So all these three things, how you can deploy on DigitalOcean, I will showcase, and how you can run using Nginx. Nginx is nothing but a proxy, and using that how you access your APIs and how you launch your front end. For example, I'll show one of the application. Example, you can take this one. So something like this application we will be building. So this type of application, how do you point your domain to that application? How you host this? This we have hosted on the,
Yes, you're audible.
yeah, those things we'll be covering actually during our, when we go for this one. So I will be covering on this DigitalOcean, how do you install. So when you are familiar with this, even AWS does the same thing, and even Google Cloud you have, right, that also does the same thing. So next, we were discussing about this. So when you say like full stack development, right, so once we have a good grasp of both front end and back end technologies, then it's a time to combine them. So full stack development is nothing but it involves creating both user interface and server side backend along with managing the database. We have seen them individual, right? HTML, CSS, then we have seen the server code, then we have the backend databases, all this independently. But there are certain stacks which you combine them and make it as a full stack development. For example, this is a commonly stack you would be hearing, like mean stack. So mean stack is nothing but MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node. Most widely asked on the resume is MERN stack. It's MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. This is most widely used stack in the companies. Then you have a LAMP is nothing but for PHP users who use, right, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So these are the different stacks. But what we will be covering nowadays is, now the architecture has got changed. It's completely microservice based architecture. So what we will be following is, we will be building a UI and we will be building a microservice architecture by using Node, and that microservice architecture we will be linking with the front end. So if you go as a full stack project, right, we use React.js. That is what we are saying, right? We use React.js for building UI components and handling the state. Backend, we use Express and Node for API routing and the server logic. So the database, I will be showing MongoDB as well as MySQL, both how do you use using Node. Authentication, I told, right, JWT, we need a JWT token for securing your APIs. Hosting, we will be hosting on the cloud DigitalOcean using Nginx. So that's what it makes us a complete full stack developer and developing an end-to-end project. So what is the learning path what you have? The learning path for the phase one will be starting with the HTML, CSS, then JavaScript. We need to know some fundamentals, basic fundamentals when you're learning with the Java, with the React framework. So in the React is nothing but we build interactive UI. In that we use the HTML, CSS. So when you are learning React, during that only we covered how do you create the HTML part and how to use the CSS. Then styling and layout all using that CSS. Then it's a phase 2 part what we'll be learning mostly on the back end. So here we can see how you write your APIs using Node and Express. Here we have including one more, which is nothing but Fastify. So what is the difference between Express and Fastify when someone asks is, mostly Express processes 17,000 to 25,000 requests per second, but Fastify on the same hand processes around 70,000 requests per second. So that's the difference between both Express and Fastify. So then we will be also understanding how do you do the middleware routing and handling different requests. Then we will be learning the database. We'll be showcasing you how you can use MySQL to fetch the data, as well as NoSQL using MongoDB, and we use a SQLize tool called ORM, and how to use all those things. I already explained, right? Implementing authentication using JWT for the backend. So the final part will be coming up. See, we have developed the front end, we have developed the back end. Then somewhere we need to link. So that is the final phase three, where you link your front end with the back end. That means we'll be learning how to fetch the data from the back end using Axios. Axios is one of the tool used in the UI, which is used to connect to your backend APIs and fetch the data to the front end. Then once this entire thing is done, then we deploy both front end and back end application. Phase 4, we won't be concentrating on all this because this is this is a DevOps activity like Docker, CI/CD pipeline, cloud platform. We have separate training session for this. We will be only doing is a manual deployment as a developer. What I need to know when we go to some other companies. And finally, what type of applications we can build? I just know showcase, right? This is excuse me. This is a completely a web application built on the React. Backend is completely on Node, uh, and database is MongoDB, hosted on a DigitalOcean platform, and we have linked the domain with the GoDaddy. So these are the type of applications what we can build. And finally, in our training session, apart from this, we covered how to build a React Native as well. So when you try to build a React Native is nothing but it's a mobile application. So when you build a React Native mobile application, this is what type of applications you can build. So why we are focusing on React Native as well is we want to showcase you guys the flavor of microservice architecture. Like we are using the same backend for building both the mobile application as well as the web application, and how they use the APIs. So this is what we covered in our entire full stack program, what we'll be covering. So what typically we will be teaching you in our full stack program will be React, then React Native. You will be getting Next.js. Why we need Next.js is most of the React applications, if you see, they are not SEO based. SEO is nothing but search engine optimization. Most of the companies they ask, right, when I search something, my website should come in the top list. So to handle those things, we will be using Next.js, which helps you to better SEO performance. Then we'll be learning on the Node backend. On the Node, we will be learning about React. Sorry, on the Node, we will be learning about Express as well as Fastify and how to use MongoDB and MySQL. Then we'll be teaching you on how do you deploy all these things on a cloud hosted box like DigitalOcean. And then we'll be showcasing you on how you can build a different one live project also we'll be doing with all these activities. That's the plan for the full stack training program. Okay guys, it's nice meeting everyone. Thank you.